Hello and welcome back to the Rearing in It Formula One podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kieran Ledwell. I'm joined by my sister,
Ellie Ledwell,
and our fellow host,
Harry McKay.
Welcome back, everybody. So today we're talking about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix that was this weekend. I think the second week in a row where we've all actually watched the race live. I wasn't asleep in bed when it started. A better weekend than some of the other ones we've faced, do you think?
I think we said it last week. It was a track where qualifying is perhaps more interesting than the race. I think the race was a bit more interesting than I was expecting, but it definitely wasn't as exciting as some other races we've had this year. It wasn't our worst, it wasn't our best.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think the qualifying did the heavy lifting, but...
Yeah, yeah. Definitely did. Right, getting straight into that then, qualifying. I suppose the big moment, the biggest moment of all of qualifying was that Norris crash in Q3, which Ellie, you did predict.
Yeah,
you absolutely nailed it. What a prediction.
At the end of last week I said I think he'll crash either in qualifying or early on in the race, and you guys were like, oh, I think that will happen later in the season. I remember Harry saying something.
I did. I did.
Yeah, you guys doubted
when there's
me.
More pressure on him.
But
I'm a hashtag doubter, but you were right.
I was right.
Again.
Yeah, I felt like the way Piastri's been performing, I feel like, I don't know that necessarily Norris was like pushing too hard or whatever, but he kind of, it's a track that's very unforgiving and there's nowhere to go. You know, he was slightly out of position and then he bumped over the curb and it just sent him flying. There wasn't really that much. Once he was wrong, there was nothing he could do about it. In other tracks, there's runoff areas and there's more margin of error, but it's just
one
like
of those where I was gonna say you realise you've crashed once you've hit the wall. Like there's no time to think about that one. It's just
no
it's happened.
Saving it. It's happening. Yeah, you're along for the ride by the time you realise. I think maybe it just goes to show that what he's been saying does have some truth in it. That maybe he's just not as one with the car as he felt like he was last year. You know, how much of that's pressure, how much of that's how the car's developed. Because you know, on the flip side, Piastri doesn't seem to be struggling with it anywhere near as much. But then again, another pole for Verstappen. You know, how much stock do you think there is in that maybe that car isn't as bad as everyone says it is? Or do you think Verstappen really just is that good? I personally think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of both definitely comes into it. I think what we can definitely see is that their simulator is not performing. They come to each track, you know, Verstappen complains it's clueless. You know, they don't know how to set up the car for results straight away. But Red Bull, and they have always been good at this. I think Verstappen's obviously his feedback is great. They get that car into the best window they can by the end of the race. Maybe last weekend they just didn't quite get there in time, but I think you know the upgrades that they have brought, I think, seem to have maybe done something as well. But yeah, I think maybe that delta we're seeing is just due to that setup, the initial setup anyway, not being good enough, and I think that's their problem. They need to get on top of immediately.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that they're on like a Friday, they're coming to it with not as much preparation. Like they don't know how it's going to perform as much. But that'll be interesting. You know, we've got another sprint weekend, Miami, next time out. It'll be interesting to see with less practice sessions how that impacts them. You know, you only get the one practice session and then you're straight in on the Friday. You don't have much time to change your car before the sprint qualifying. So, that'll be interesting. Interesting to see.
I think another it's hard. I mean, with such a young season, it's really hard to like judge. But another thing is, you know, Yuki was in Q3 again for the second time in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's more on him that's maybe more a comment on him than anything else. But maybe that's another sign that the car is improving. That the second, whoever it is at the time, the second Red Bull driver is just that little bit more competitive. But again, maybe that's. But that I think part of the thing with Red Bull is like they felt like they needed to make that change, but how are they really meant to judge where their car is when Max will make it work no matter what, and they change their second driver already?
I mean,
how do they really judge where their car really is as well?
I mean, Tsunoda, I'm looking at the Q3 lap times for qualifying, and it was a 127.29 for Verstappen, 128.2 for Tsunoda, so about 9/10 slower.
Yeah.
So, P8, top 10 Q3, I mean, that's good compared to what we've been seeing, but, I mean, that is a significant amount of time. I know that the top 10 are really close.
That's a huge gap.
So P8 and your half a second maybe is not so bad, but, I mean, look, I think Tsunoda's doing a good job so far. I'm not dissing it, but that gap is still there, and, I mean, Bax, it was an amazing quali from him, so I think he is on another level, but, yeah, how to judge it is a difficult one, even with that time difference, I suppose.
Another good qualifying from the Williams boys as well. I think it doesn't seem like it's a fluke. I think this year their car is, comparatively quite well put together for a lot of the midfield teams, and I think that's going to be interesting to see if they keep up their qualifying performances, because it's leading to some good results. As Ellie's wrote down here, Albon scored 4 times more points this season than Yuki and Lawson combined. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is due to their qualifying position, right?
I think I was trying to make the point of Red Bull go through so many drivers. Maybe I think it's a common thing. People think that Albon was one that kind of slipped through. He's doing really well this season. But as you say, it was both drivers this weekend did well, both qualified well. And you have to remember, Sainz didn't race here last year. Behrman stepped in for him because he had his appendix out. Was that it? So not only was this a new car he was coming to, it was a track he hadn't raced for 2 years. So, I think it makes it even more impressive in that context.
I think it's funny that he out-qualified Hamilton in Ferrari in his old seat. I think that's quite a statement, isn't it? Just it's nice to see that kind of that stuff on track.
Yeah, definitely. So if we move on to the race then, on Sainz, the benefit that Red Bull don't have that Williams did have this week, and it shows how important it is having a teammate alongside you. Because for the last few laps there, Sainz basically dragged Albon along with the DRS to prevent Hadjar from overtaking him, which confirmed, I think it was P8 and P9 for Williams, which is solid points. So it just goes to show that where other teams may have a second driver that's not quite on their level, it shows there how important it is when you're fighting by yourself versus in a team. Because without Sainz being there, Albon would have been overtaken, not easily, but would have probably been overtaken.
Yeah, and Albon...
Hadjar was flying, so...
Yeah, I think Albon, would have been passed, and then I think potentially Sainz would have been caught up as well, because Hadjar was on much, much fresher tyres. I'm not sure how many laps fresher, but they were much fresher. So, it was good teamwork, and also on Sainz, he had only had 1 point this season so far, and that was from the race where we had disqualifications, and this was 4 points on his own merit, kind of, it was a good result built from there. Yeah, exactly, to secure 6 points, so fantastic.
Yeah,
you don't want to speak too soon, but it does seem like he's coming online a bit more in that car and giving Albon a little bit more of a run for money, making it a bit more equal. So that'll be really good to see if he can keep that up. We can get a proper little teammate battle going there, as well as doing things like this where they can help each other. Because we sort of said, I said 5th in the constructors standings, which they still are keeping at that level. So it'd be nice to see them continue that run of form.
Well, I need for my bingo to be signed off, I need them to have a little bust up, so that's only going to happen with them both performing at a similar level. So fingers crossed that they get a bit less, for my sake, I hope they get a bit less friendly but still perform well, because it's always good to see Williams do well. Someone who didn't do so well then, we've mentioned him already this episode, Liam Lawson getting smacked with a 10-second penalty. The new Esteban Ocon is what I'm hearing. The Australian Ocon. No,
He's not Australian.
For our earlier listeners, you'll know that I did once on one of our first episodes this season forget that Liam Lawson is actually not an Aussie but a Kiwi, but slapped with a 10-second penalty for an incident that was, I'd say, quite. I've seen the footage back. I'd say it was quite a harsh one, given that for a very similar, if not actually worse incident, Max Verstappen got a 5-second on the opening lap. Do you think it's fair that the officials clearly are a lot more lenient on the first lap, or do you think it's kind of just part of F1 that on the first lap you can get away with a little bit more? Because I think decisions like that, it just feels unfair.
I can't remember exactly the incident. I need to watch it back, but I'm okay with first lap stuff on that point being a little bit more lenient, because I mean, you get that many cars in there, it's always a bit of a mess. From my point of view, I think the Max first lap incident deserved a penalty. I do think 5 seconds is fair. We've seen similar things in the past.
Yeah, I agree.
They get 5 seconds, first lap, first incident things. There's countless examples of it. I think 5 seconds was fair. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can argue more.
That's the thing. That's why I would have said for Lawson, but it was basically the same incident, if not even less of a cutting the corner.
Yeah,
and he got slapped with a 10.
Yeah, I guess 10.
It just felt really hard.
But they said to Max it would have been 10 if it were not on the opening lap. It would have been. It was only given 5 because it was on the opening lap. But I think we don't want to see drivers being overly hesitant in the first few corners. You know, we want to see racing. We don't want it to be too tightly controlled. We want penalties and repercussions for causing collisions and dangerous driving. But we don't want it to be a procession, because at the moment, especially with how many street circuits we have, the next, in May we've got 3 races and 2 of them are street circuits. If you don't make a move on the first lap, you might not have a chance to make a move for the rest of the race.
Yeah, true. But then again, is that almost not proof that there's so much of an advantage to be had in cutting that corner, winning that place? It didn't quite work out for Verstappen this week, which we'll get onto, but let's say he did get an extra 5 seconds down the road, which he wouldn't have done if he was stuck in behind. Is it fair? Because surely then at that point you're basically giving a green light on people. I guess we want to see risks, we want to see good overtakes, but if we encourage people to cheat because they know they're going to get away with it, and the advantage is so much bigger than the penalty because the penalty is less harsh because it's the opening lap, I don't think, because in another world, if Verstappen won the race, would we be saying that's fair because he, on the first corner of the race, drove in a straight line instead of trying to make the corner? Well, not quite, but he didn't make the corner. He kept going on.
It's hard. It's a hard one because I do agree to some extent, but I think that sort of letting them race the first lap stuff maybe overrules it. I mean, I will say, often the reason these conversations come about is not. You can have a proper conversation even if what's led to it maybe feels a bit dodge, because we've had similar incidents like this in the past. It's a first lap thing. People are very unwilling to yield the corners, right? But the number one topic of conversation for the whole race from the Sky commentators was, a similar thing to this, and how they kept bringing up this penalty and how it wasn't fair, and it, obviously in the end this race it had an effect, and it reverted the position back. That might not have been the case if Verstappen was faster.
Affected the result.
I did just get I know I'm a Red Bull fan, a Verstappen fan, but it did get to the point to me where it's like, okay, we get it, you've made your point, let's drop it now. It just felt way too harsh. It felt they would never, ever, ever have done that for any other driver. No other driver on the grid, they would have spent the time that they did. In fact, the last lap of the race, they sort of preluded announcing Verstappen in second with another little rant about this penalty, and it just felt a bit wrong to me, and it felt like it's hard to distinguish a good solid point about penalty length when you're bringing it up so much in one context, But again, I know that's twinged with bias from my side as well. But I wonder if you two felt you noticed that.
I think I guess because it's not an isolated incident. We see Max do it quite often.
Yeah.
Sorry. I guess it's just if he were in a car that was quicker and had escaped, because the clean air, like Leclerc said it when he got in the clean air on his hard tyres. Was it hard tyres in his medium tyres in his first stint? Was it?
Oh, first stint was medium. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So when he was on his medium tyres in the fresh air, the clean air, he said it was fantastic. He was able to run longer than they thought. The tyres were much better behaved. They were able to like cool the brakes, whatever. So I think when the fresh air has such an advantage, if you do take the 5-second penalty, you could feasibly get 5 seconds down the road. And I guess that's where the discussion came from, because if the effect of the clean air, if the cars were able to run behind one another easier, it wouldn't be as big of a talking point. It would be like, 5 seconds, that seems fair enough. But it's like, but you have such a big advantage for taking that penalty. 5 seconds isn't that much when you actually consider everything else.
Exactly. But moving forward then, do you think that given they had that 5-second penalty, Red Bull made the right strategy calls with bringing Verstappen in when they did? Or do you think they kind of accepted that they were going to lose that place because they weren't going to get that 5 seconds ahead of Piastri? Because I think it was like they left Max out for another 2 laps after Piastri had pitted, which, at that point the undercut was borderline guaranteed with fresher tyres for Piastri. I mean, it's hard for us to say because we don't know what Max was feeling in the car, but do you think that was the best choice they could have had at getting Verstappen back out in front?
No, I think they should have pitted him the lap after as soon as they could, because they said the undercut was 1.5 seconds a lap, and Piastri was like 3 seconds behind. And obviously he then had a slow pit stop of about a second additionally. So that's 4 seconds that Piastri had, was behind, shall we say. And if they'd have pitted him the next lap, I think that they, even with the 5 second penalty, I think they would have come out closer. But in the end, there was definitely. It would have been a tighter call. There would have been more pressure on Piastri, who was passing through traffic and back markers and stuff like that. So it wasn't an easy out lap, or out 2 laps as it turned out to be for Piastri. So I think they should have brought him in the next lap as soon as they could. Yeah,
I think that would have put him, like you said, closer. I think the only way to get out and stay out ahead was, obviously that gap was under 5 seconds the whole time, was to get to where he got it around 3 and try and just suddenly push for that 4, come in before Piastri, take that gamble, and then hope a combination of the undercut and maybe a slow pit stop from McLaren. That would be the only way to stay ahead. So if you don't do that, then obviously you're thinking, okay, let's just try and get as close behind as possible. But by waiting that extra lap, you're sort of not done what Ellie's saying and get close behind. So it was a little bit weird, but I think there was an acceptance that
it was weird. I think for them not to bring him in. I did find it weird that they chose not to bring him in as soon as they could, the lap after Piastri went around.
Because we were watching
all
it,
you achieved is wasting a second and a half of time. Really.
We were surprised that Piastri went in first, weren't we? When we were watching it, we said, I can't believe they've pitted him. I couldn't believe that Red Bull had allowed McLaren to do the undercut, knowing it was quite powerful. Yeah. And then after they had pitted Piastri first, it seemed weird that they didn't either immediately pit or try and offset and keep him out and give him a tyre advantage at the end. It seemed slightly strange. It was, they didn't do the they didn't do the undercut because they didn't have the opportunity, but then they didn't extend either. They just, I don't know, maybe they were racing their own strategy. I'm not sure.
I mean, it felt like an acceptance of second is what it felt like. It felt like that's what they sort of were happy with.
Definitely.
And that's always a bit weird to come to terms with. I mean, but
because even at the end, then when it wasn't a hugely dominant victory by Piastri. The 5 second penalty kind of played a big factor, but it did feel like at the end when he did then, due to the pit stops, come out with that advantage over Verstappen, he wasn't going to let it go. There's a few times it like dipped below 3 seconds and he just put an extra half a second back on top. It felt like he was in total control from that point onwards, really. And yeah, like Red Bull didn't really give Max a chance to get that close to him to have a go at him. Again, the lap before, if they did it and he comes out a second or 2 seconds behind instead of the 3 or 4 it probably was by the time he cleared the pits, because it felt like at that point there wasn't really a chance of catching Piastri down the road.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, like, I definitely felt that way. Like, it felt like it was a done deal. I mean, Piastri's, you never know. I mean, you can make a mistake, but he's so consistent. I guess when you look at the time, and it, like you said, it was around that 3 seconds. I mean, that's not a dominant win. That's not your 20 seconds up the road. No. So just thinking maybe down the road, and I mean, Red Bull can take away some positives from that. McLaren, I mean, I think their strategy was really good here for both of them. We'll come on to Norris in a second. So I think if they keep that up, they've got the slight pace advantage. They should be okay. But yeah, like, I mean, they shouldn't be resting on their laurels. And I mean, I know the focus is shifting to next year, but they can't let up too much, because I think this could be a close season.
Yeah, I think maybe 5 races in, it's closer than we thought.
Yeah.
In terms of like pace wise, at the end of the day, McLaren have won all but one race, but pace wise, I think it is closer than we thought.
Yeah.
At least compared to Verstappen, purely just Verstappen really, but Verstappen's there, the Mercedes are not a million miles off. I think maybe it's a bit closer than we thought. Like, McLaren clearly are the fastest car, but maybe not as fast in terms of being a lot faster than others than we would have expected. Still enough in the tank, it feels like, to win both championships at this point. But you're right, I don't think they're at a state where they can decide to just shut down and start working on next year's car by any stretch of the imagination. But like you said, then if we move on to Norris, like we said, that mistake in qualifying cost him dearly. At that point it did feel inevitable he was going to lose the championship lead to either Verstappen or Piastri.
Yeah.
But from P10 then, could he have done much better than what he did? What did he end up P4? Yeah. I think he kind of drove as good a race as he could have, and McLaren absolutely nailed the strategy of getting him on the hards a bit later than others to move through the field. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think he had a great strategy. I mean, he started on the hards, right, when the people above him were on the medium.
Sorry, that's what I meant, other way around.
The only thing, I guess, is, like, Leclerc also was able to extend his first stint a lot. So I think that's why he didn't end up managing to get on the podium, was because Leclerc had raced an incredible race himself. But yeah, to come from 10th to 4th, it's a street circuit, it's tricky, it's tight, you crashed there the day before, you're going to be a bit apprehensive. But it was a good race, and he moved through the field partly on his own skill and his own overtaking, but also on the strategy of the team. So it was a real team performance.
I think they nailed it.
I mean, start 10th. The person who finished in 10th, Hadjar, was 67 seconds off the lead. Norris was 9. So, I mean, really, just from that perspective, I mean, it was fantastic. And that was clearly the winning strategy. Leclerc doing the same thing and was great. I think him in 4th keeps it interesting. The change of the championship lead gives us a nice little narrative to spin. So, I'm happy he recovered as many points as possible, but it still gave us that little spicy finish there with Piastri taking it, and maybe we get a bit more inter-team rivalry now. Who knows?
Yeah,
exactly. But whilst we're on the topic of Leclerc, then, the pace he showed in those hards, I think, was really impressive. It was probably the best that Ferrari car has looked. I mean, other than the sprint win from Lewis in China, but since that point, that's probably the best that Ferrari's looked, and Leclerc was really able to drive those hards to the best of their ability, it feels like.
Yeah.
Do you think that's them maybe turning a corner a little bit, Ferrari? I mean, I know it's a 3rd place, it's not go crazy, but do you think that's them turning a corner a little bit in terms of what they think they can get out of this car, or do you think this will be, the first podium and the only podium for a while?
I think we have to think about as well, Mercedes were off the pace this weekend, so obviously we've seen George in 3rd a lot. So Red Bull only really have one capable driver, like one podium driver.
Yes, podium capable driver. That's
Lando was starting in 10th. The Mercedes were both somewhat off the pace, perhaps unexpectedly less pace than they had been. So yeah, I think the Ferrari had improved, but I think maybe I'm just being a bit pessimistic, but I think you have to look at it from the bigger picture and say,
kind of
actually,
fell in their lap a little bit.
It fell in their lap, but then they took the opportunity. Something we don't always say about Ferrari is they chose the right strategy, and it worked really well. And Leclerc did drive a good race.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think he drove. Yeah, I think he drove as well as he could in that car. But I think you're right that maybe that's me with rose tinted glasses a little bit. That it did kind of fall in their lap a little bit.
I mean, we'll see, but
yeah, we'll see. Maybe even if anything, maybe it's the confidence boost that they need at this point. Maybe a break next week now after the triple header. This is what they need.
Well, I mean, we are looking at Leclerc though. We're not really we're in the context of Leclerc here. We're not talking Ferrari, really, are we? Because Hamilton, I mean, we can't say he had the exact same fortune, did he? I mean, 7th. I mean, the pace.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't there, was it?
Yeah, he's written off the season. He's basically in interviews has said like it's going to be a difficult year. We're not going to be fighting in 2025. So 5 races in, 19 races to go. He's already kind of chalked this one off as a waste of time.
But he said like wasn't it like what do you need to win or something like that? And he said a new brain. I'm pretty sure. Like that is not what you want your driver to say. I mean, I mean, really. I mean, I think you put here, is he washed? I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but I think I did say that.
When I was writing my notes, like just as shorthand whilst we were watching, keep my one eye on the track. I did just put down, is Hamilton washed? ? Maybe that's harsh, but we're kind of hearing, if he's saying things like that, that's the kind of thing he's been saying since 2022. It's 2025 now. At the end of the day, we're quite a few years on from that, and obviously different team, different this, different that. But it kind of feels like his mindset has shifted a bit to where, I don't think you would have heard Lewis Hamilton of 4 or 5 years ago talk like that, even if he wasn't in the fastest car. I don't think that would be the mindset, but I do. Yeah, it is worrying. I think like the mentality he has now, and the way he is with saying comments like that, doesn't strike you as somebody who feels like they have a world championship in them if he really wants to push for an 8th. How many years is he going to give? How many years are Ferrari going to put up with him underperforming and quote unquote waiting for next year? He's getting paid a lot of money, dollars to wait for next year. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, like I don't think Ferrari would be too happy with comments like that if they continue. But hey, we'll see. Again, maybe he will figure it out. But Formula 1 is not the place where you get a year to figure it out, right? Even if you are Lewis Hamilton. But I think they've given him enough money that his seat's pretty safe. Okay, speaking of safe seats, Yuki, what was this? His 3rd race in the Red Bull?
Yes.
Didn't finish this week. What was it? A first lap or an early lap incident taking him and Pierre Gasly out of the race. But I'd say you've heard less swirlings as a result than we did when Lawson, dropped it in Australia and crashed out then. Do you think he seems a bit more secure in that Red Bull seat now? Getting to Q3 2 times in a row. Do you think that's enough to give him a little bit of breathing room?
Yeah, you'd hope so. I mean, well, you never say never with Red Bull, but they're not going to change the driver again, surely. Yeah. And I mean, Yuki already is performing. I mean, I suppose really we're talking like Perez level, but I guess Perez maybe not quite. He did dip in form, didn't he? So, yeah. I mean, this incident I think was unlucky, and I think it was a first lap racing incident. it's a shame. I mean, who knows what he could have done in the race? I don't think much more than. So I guess he'd be tackling with the Williams boys. So
it might be the blessing in disguise.
Probably the best he could have hoped for. But yeah.
But then that taking Gasly out as well was a big shame for him, because he's really been looking good as of late, Gasly, in that Alpine. They're another team that maybe seem to have found a bit of pace in their car. So a big shame for him as well to crash out first lap and not keep up with the points.
He would have been fine points as well. So I mean, it would have made that battle there, I mean, with the Williams and Hadjar more interesting if those two were there.
Yeah, it would have been quite interesting.
But I mean, it's good for me again as well with my predictions. I mean, Alpine still way down there at the bottom. I think they're second to bottom of the constructors. So, I mean, I'm a happy man.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of happy men, something that I wrote down, which I've noted a few times, is just the incessant nature of the FIA president Ben Sulayem being everywhere,
lurking in the shadows
over an F1 over a weekend. Today, this Sunday, just today, Piastri, he wins the race, he pulls back up on the racetrack, which I don't like, by the way. I don't like the idea of parking on the track like that when it's not a special occasion. Fifth race of the season, nothing that important really about it. Why are you putting up on the track? You've not just won a championship. Anyway, that's just me being a grumpy old man. But the first person that shakes the hand or goes to Piastri once he's just won a race, gets out the car, is Ben Sulayem shaking his hand. First on scene, first on camera. I don't know what to make of it. I think he's just trying to get his face out there as much as he can because he's aware of trying to keep his job. But I don't know. I guess we've had eccentric characters in the Formula One hierarchy before. You look at Bernie Ecclestone, people like that. I don't know what your thoughts are, but it's just kind of annoying me with how much
it seems like that.
Especially when
it seems like he's just
when you consider he's not in charge of Formula One, right? He's in charge of the whole of the FIA. Like there's a lot of motorsport, and yet why is he always there? Why is he always? Yeah, like you have other jobs to do. Go and do them.
Yeah.
It's not as glamorous though,
Yeah, exactly. Well, those other jobs seem to include firing people. So. Yeah, well, that's the thing. That maybe that's also a problem with motorsport itself, is that it is so F1 dominant. That's where the money is. That's where the eyes are. That's where the attention is, and the sponsors are.
I mean,
and that probably
it's always
isn't good
been a
for
rich
the
man's
sport of motorsport
game. Like
Harry, you could have so easily said it's a rich man's world and dropped the mic, but I know you're a massive ABBA fan.
Rich man's
I messed
world.
it up. Messed it up. So it's now we're just at the point where the rich men are getting themselves into the positions of power and using that as a way to show off, I think, and flirt with the rich and famous kind of vibe, and that's what it feels like. It just feels like he's sticking his head in a bit too much. And I mean, maybe we wouldn't be saying this if he was a well-liked president, and I think that's probably fair to say, but
yeah, exactly. I think that's fair. Like I just said, I think when it was Bernie Ecclestone, people kind of he was who he was. Is still
but they're different jobs. They're different jobs.
No, I've got. But I'm just saying, like, eccentric
charge of
characters
Formula One.
Who gets
It's
their
just
face around.
Yeah.
It just feels a lot more.
But he owned the
Ben
sport,
Sulayem.
so.
Yeah. No, exactly. So maybe he's got more of a right, but Ben Sulayem just feels a lot more calculated to me. Okay, so whilst we're on the topic of Piastri picking up his third race win of the season, the only person to be on multiple race wins, do you think that win cements him? Well, do you think it cements him? I think it cements him as a title challenge is kind of a given, but where do you think it moves him in terms of who's favourite to win the championship? Do you think he's starting to emerge as an early front runner?
Yeah, definitely. I think the way that he's conducted himself, he made an error in the difficult conditions in Australia, but other than that, he's been reasonably faultless, whereas you can't say that about Norris.
Yeah.
So,
or even Verstappen either.
Yeah. And in a tight season, it's the little errors that are gonna build up, and Norris, maybe he'll be able to get it under control, but he, as we said before the season even started, we said if there's one driver you want in a championship battle to keep it interesting, it's going to be Norris, because he's going to make those mistakes. So they're not unexpected, the errors that he's making. It's just when they accumulate, it's a 6th place qualifying here, it's a tap to the wall here, it's a 5th place penalty there, but it adds up to a lot, and we could be looking, maybe it will go down to the wire, but the way that Piastri's going at the moment, we could be wrapped up with a few races to spare.
Exactly. Definitely.
I think I agree with everything you guys are saying, and I want to lean more to Piastri as favourite, but I think for now I'll stick with Norris favourite still. I think when we do see the speed, the pure speed, I think he's faster at the moment. That I think Piastri has maybe a high ceiling, but I think at the moment, and I said it last week about Norris's mental state, and then he goes and crashes here, but in a weird way, like last week, it has sort of proved it, because he did keep his head down, he got everything out of the race. And he recovered and got some good points. Now, because of the fact that we've talked about this multiple times, he's had multiple things, and we're only 5 races in. That does lead to the fact that Piastri's more consistent. He should be favourite.
But then maybe.
But I do think surely he's going to get it under.
Yeah.
He'll get there.
Yeah, Piastri's definitely in a purple patch form wise.
Yeah, might be.
And maybe that'll fade. And again, aggression to the mean. Maybe Norris is getting out his 5 mistakes for the year now, and maybe he'll be flawless throughout. And Verstappen will have a few mistakes, and Piastri have a few mistakes as people do. So interesting. I think he's opened the door.
I suppose it depends as well.
Opened the door to being a title favourite, maybe not the favourite, in terms of he's now entered that conversation. Whereas I think in some of our pre-season predictions, none of us really had him up at 1st or 2nd, and I feel like the chance of him finishing 1st or 2nd is maybe a lot higher than we would have thought before the season. I think that at the very least is true.
Yeah, I think it sort of, to me as well, depends on how much Verstappen sticks with it, because at the moment, points wise, it's a 3-horse race.
Yeah.
But we're very early on. So if it stays like that, it really is anyone's game. And when you're suddenly down to 3, the consistency of Piastri seems like it's going to weigh a lot more. Whereas if it's just Piastri and Norris, I think my money would be on Norris edging. But then maybe by next year, I would go the other way. So
that's I kind of agree with that. That's a good way of putting it, I think. Right, moving forward then to our driver of the day. Els, I put you on the spot. Who is your driver of the day?
Oh, do you know, I'm going to mention a few people. I think we haven't spoken about Hadjar. He had a good race.
No, we haven't.
Climbing up to P10. And that was a very solid performance. So he is my second choice. But my first choice, I'm going to go for Leclerc. I know that I said I was being pessimistic earlier, but he drove the race very well. And as you say, his final stint, his pace was really, really good. And so I'm giving him my driver of the day.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll go next then. So I think for me, tough one. I think I'm probably going to agree with you, Els. I think there was a point where it felt like Norris was going to catch up and get Leclerc, just based on the pace that we've seen throughout the season so far. And you know what, Leclerc kept his pace high and fought him off and finished with a well-earned 3rd place. So I think on merit, I'm going to give it to Leclerc as well. Harry, driver of the day.
Yeah, Leclerc, strong qualifying, strong race result.
Yeah.
Norris, poor qualifying but strong race result. Leclerc worthy on both fronts, but you guys both sort of picked him. Norris, I sort of want to, but can't for the qualifying mistake.
Yeah.
Which leaves us sort of lower down the field, so I'm going to say Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think this has been, his best weekend so far. Good, strong points, helping out his teammate. I mean, he's sort of done everything he said when he set out at the start of this season. He wants to get those results, but he also wants to help the team and push the team forward. And I mean, you can't ask for a better weekend than what he's had. So I'll say Carlos Sainz.
Yeah. Excellent shot. Okay, so bingo update then. I'm going to stake my claim. Our predictions, our more wacky predictions right at the start of the season. One of mine that I thought wasn't so wacky, and I'm not surprised it's happened already. Well, you can agree or disagree. Time penalty costs the driver a race win. I would make the argument that is exactly what happened this week. Without that 5-second penalty, I think Verstappen would have had a much better, if not would have won that race, a much better chance of winning the race.
When you said it,
are you going to give me that one?
When you said it would be a time penalty added on after the race. So I'm not
down.
Or like as they cross the line.
I did know that. I was just trying to sneak one past you.
So I'm giving you a 5-second penalty for that.
I still think there's a good chance of it happening though. I think we've had a few races where the finishing, we haven't seen huge gaps. Well, Piastri's had the most dominant win. I think it was like 12, 13 seconds.
15 and a half, 15.499. Do you not remember from last week's quiz?
15. Oh, I apologize.
Well, I think Harry did it and he got it right. He said 15 and it was 15.499. So, girl, your memory's terrible.
Oh, good. Well, that's it. It wasn't my question. But either way, I think we've seen a few races finish quite closely, so I still think there is a chance for that one to come true.
Yeah.
Cool.
So go on, Harry. I mean, my grid is a nightmare. But I do have on mine the first driver to 100 points will be Max Verstappen. And we currently have Piastri on 99 points. Obviously Norris on 89, Verstappen on 87. So it will most likely happen next race.
There is a chance for three of them do it.
It's a sprint race.
Multiple.
So in the sprint race, they would need Piastri is the only one who can do it in the sprint race. So Piastri as long as he finishes in the top 8 or whatever you need, he'll be the first. So barring any upset for Piastri, he will be the first.
Let's say
you've ruined my suspense there. Yeah. Well,
okay, let's imagine a world where Piastri finishes outside the top 8 and doesn't get any points.
Yes.
I think the way to determine who's the first person to 100 points is the person who crosses the line first. So whoever finishes highest on the day is the first person to get to 100 points. I think that's how we should do it. Yeah. But I think, Eddie's ruined the suspense there because Piastri probably, barring a miracle, probably will be in the top 8 just because there's only 1 point he needs, right? Because he's on 99. So, So there. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're moving on to the next race then. Obviously a week off this week. And then we are in Miami. So the first US race of the season. I wouldn't call it a fan favourite, is putting it diplomatically. The Miami
Car
Grand Prix.
Park Classic.
I love the fake marina. Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not even a street circuit. It's in a car park.
Can I just take a moment to say how ridiculously big American car parks are? Like, this is for a stadium, an American football stadium. The only car park at Tottenham Stadium is underneath, right? It's like right on the high street. There's no parking. The Emirates...
That's because they've got no fans. No one wants to go. Emirates, they don't need any.
There's no park. They're in the city, right? This is the stadium. Like, I feel like every single person in the stadium could drive, and there'd be enough parking space for them. That's crazy. Do they I guess they don't have trains and public transport. But anyway, I just thought I'd say.
Do drive.
They don't know what a train is.
Like, it's just crazy to think you can fit a whole Formula One race in a car park.
Yeah. No, yeah, the idea that the car park's big enough to fit a Formula One track and all the...
And
but
a
yeah,
fake
everything
marina.
that goes,
Guys,
like
keep
forgetting
the
the lovely
pits, the
fake-
Yeah,
paddock,
exactly.
the garages, like everything.
Yeah.
I think like the paddock bit might be inside the stadium itself. At least it has been in previous years, I think. But yeah, it's just...
Yes, there's
It's
definitely been some
crazy.
stuff in
Yeah.
there, yeah.
Anyway, enough of that tangent.
Yeah. Well, I guess... any thoughts on the actual race then, apart from the fact it's
No.
a bit of a gaudy spectacle? No thoughts on the race. It's just... It's kind of a Grand Prix. You just kind of... It happens. You kind of have to, like, you know, hold your breath for the weekend and let it be over. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
it's cheesy. It's too American.
it's the too
Sorry to any of
American
our
thing,
American
yeah,
fans.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just far too American. It's too cheesy. The track's bad. You can't overtake. But don't you worry. We'll be here letting you know our thoughts after the race for sure.
Can't wait.
Right. I think on that rather down note, we'll bring the energy up again to deliver our final thoughts. Ellie's favourite part of the show. I'll start with you, Els. Any final thoughts from you? What are your final thoughts?
I have two final thoughts.
From
My
the Saudi
first
Arabian
final thought is
Grand
I
Prix?
apologise for my voice. I have a sore throat. I had some honey and tea, but it's not helped. And my other final thought is coming back to our love affair of Lance Stroll. He has now gone out in Q1 more times than any other driver. And well, just love up for him.
What a record.
Yeah, he's
Legend.
written himself into the history books.
What a record. Didn't he make a really weird comment about that
yeah,
as well?
I was going to say his comment.
If
What was it? Like, if you put the McLaren drivers in a Sauber, they'd be loved
Yeah.
too.
In a Sauber.
It's like, well,
imagine
you're not in a
saying to
Sauber.
your dad, I know
Imagine
you've
saying
spent
that.
billions of pounds on me.
Imagine the next
but
day in the
I'm
garage,
worst
going
car.
back to the garage, you know. Well, imagine going back to the garage with all the mechanics
Yeah.
who worked tirelessly on a car that, you know, he's crashed a few times, had some silly crashes in his career. You know, they work all
Yeah.
day and night to fit a car for him, and he makes a comment like that.
It just, like...
I think it's okay to think it. We can say it as fans, but
Oh,
for a driver
it was
to say a comment
unprofessional.
like that, I think
It's ridiculous,
pretty poor,
yeah.
to be honest.
But hey, he's not going to get fired for it.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, I just love that it's just like, he's also then dissing
Yeah.
on another car. Like, he's not in a Sauber. That's the thing. He's like,
know,
sure,
another
but that's
team.
irrelevant, man, because neither are you.
Yeah, he's never raced in a Sauber.
It's like if my grandmother had wheels out.
Yeah.
It's like if my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike kind
yeah.
of moment. Like it doesn't mean anything. Right, Harry. What are your final thoughts from this week?
I think apart from the, obvious bias from the Sky F1 commentating team, I had a good time in this race. But my final thoughts, I'm a little bit more optimistic about Miami than I think you two are, because there's going to be some great celebs on that track.
not hard.
And we're
Brandon's
gonna
gonna have no
watch.
idea.
I'm thinking maybe we get Taylor Swift. Yeah, he's gonna go wild. I think we're gonna get some good ones. So
True, it's probably our best chance of getting a brand deal. So
Yeah.
should probably change tack a little bit.
but yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Right. My final thoughts then. My final thoughts are, I'm going to say it here first. I think Piastri is going to win the championship. That's my big prediction from here on out. Locking in. You heard it here. Well, probably not first. A lot of people have probably said it. But on this podcast, which is should be your only source of F1 news and knowledge.
Well, Ellie, you
Oscar
can
Piastri
take Norris,
will be the 2025
and I'll
world
take
champion.
Verstappen, and we can sort of split it that way
Yeah.
and
Fight to the death.
see which one comes out on top.
Oh, when you said take them, I thought you meant like beat them up so that Piastri won.
Perfect. Right.
I mean, that's one way of doing it, but if you want to make a big bet on it, then I reckon we put the odds in our favour. But no, I wasn't thinking quite that violent just yet.
Right, well, before we get taken off the airways for inciting violence, I think we'll wrap it up there. Okay. So, thank you very much for listening. Nearly said watching. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Rear Winging It Formula 1 podcast. Don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, follow us, hit the bell, hit the like button, whatever you want to do. Drop us a comment, follow us on Instagram, and have a great rest of the week.
Goodbye.
See you later. Goodbye from me.
Thanks for listening.
Goodbye from everyone else. Goodbye.